Okay. So, going over very quickly where we're at, of course, hopefully you already know where we're at. We're moving into our third essay cycle starting tonight with the rough draft for you guys. And for those watching at home, Wednesday. All right. So, remember, it's still a rough draft. The first one this week is still a rough draft. You want to do as good as you can, but we're not crying over points we lose for this because we have an opportunity to fix it. And for this essay cycle, okay, I will grade the final essay as a separate entity. And what that means is, even if you do poorly on the rough draft, you have a shot at doing well independently on the final essay. Okay? If you don't know what I mean, if you remember way back, and also announcements and such, I said that these are cycles, meaning they are graded kind of together. Okay? So when you do the rough draft, okay, you get a grade on that, and you get comments to fix and all that stuff. And you do the final essay, which is basically the rough draft editing. Right? So if you get an 80 on the rough draft, which is like 20 and 80%, right? You know, you could probably fix everything and do well and rise to maybe an 86 and 88, okay, depending on the mistakes. But you can't really get to like a 95 because it's still attached to how you did on the rough draft for the first two blocks. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. This next one coming up will not be that way, which works to your advantage, of course, right? So even if you get like a 15 out of 25 for whatever reason, okay, which is 60%, if you turn in a final essay that's good, you can get a 90 or a 95. It's not attached, right? So moving forward, this is a good thing for you. I'm trying to do everything I can to help you, you know, get the best grade that you can, okay? But there's always a but, isn't there? Right. There's always a but. But you need to put it in, guys. You need to put the effort in, okay? No fooling around. If you fooled around for the first two, whatever you've been doing, stop doing it. Okay? You got one more time to focus, to do, you know, take the day off. You have to do the final essay, whatever you need to do, right? Send the kids to the grandparents, you know, with a dog in the backyard, throw your phone out, whatever. Because this is the shot, right? If you've done poorly up to this point or not as well as you want to do, you can make it up here. So, you know, but it's going to require one last shot of effort. Okay, I've seen a disturbing trend, especially for you online people, to be ignoring the idea of attention to detail for whatever reason. Okay, you can't ignore the details, guys. As you found out over the past two assignments, I don't ignore the details. So that means you can't ignore the details. If I'm telling you to fix something, you need to fix it. I'm handing you the points. It's so frustrating when I'm grading and I see that, you know, I told you exactly how to fix it and it wasn't that hard. And you just ignore it for whatever reason. I don't know why. I was sitting in my office last week grading, I was getting so aggravated, not necessarily with you guys, but in general, because, you know, people were ignoring, just basically flushing points. What, you know, you're an A or a B. How are you going to get an A or a B if you're not listening? Or you're not trying, or you're not, whatever it is you're not doing. Okay. That's why I said a minute ago, this is it. I mean, you got one more push. Now's the time not to ignore what I'm talking about. Okay. If I ask you, or if I mention talking to a tutor, it's not optional, guys. It's required. Okay. And none of you are good enough writers to put it off that you went and talked to a tutor. If you didn't talk to a tutor, I mean, I can tell. Your writing is not going to go from here to here on its own. You know, unless you just grossly were asleep for this, woke up or whatever. But just, you know, get to talk to a tutor if I tell you to. I'm doing it for a reason, guys. It's not because you're particularly slow or lacking knowledge or whatever. It's because I feel that you need another perspective. That's all. Just like those of you who are taking 9/11 or whatever the prep class is for this, it goes hand in hand with 1101. You know, you listen to them too. We're working together, guys. We're trying to help you cross that line, get across that finish line. And I'll drag you across if I have to. You guys have your hands up when I said you wanted A or B. Damn it, I want you to get an A or B. Okay? So you need to pay attention, guys. If you haven't been, now's the time. Okay? So anyway, enough of that. You get the idea. So today we're going to get into detail about argument and persuasion, as much detail as we can in our hour here, right? I want to start by talking about the assignment itself, because there are some things that you have to follow for this specifically. Okay? I posted the announcement, and we're going to go over that, just to make sure, again, we're all on the same page. Okay? Yeah, see, I mean, it was so prevalent, guys, that I literally posted an announcement to all classes about the tutor thing. If you're told to go see a tutor, you need to go see a tutor. I mean, you don't have to physically go see a tutor. They will work with you online, so whatever. I understand that, especially with my online guys, you chose an online class for a reason, and I get it. You don't have to come in, per se. You can contact them. Even in the library, you can call and talk to them. Okay. So for our argument / persuasive essay, guys, there are 3 big files for this. Okay, and they're found in our lesson folder, lesson 6, essay 3, argument persuasive. Okay, same format as before, and these 3 files, and they're highlighted in red. That's why they're highlighted in red, because they're highlighted in red and blackboard. Okay? They are the form and ideas, the essay specs themselves, and then model. Okay? You need to pay attention to that, guys. Pay them. When you're done and you're ready to submit, look at it. Take a second and look at it. Right? And having looked at the model, ask yourself, does mine look like that? Talking physically, not what's in it. Just physically. Right? And if it doesn't, don't submit it. Fix it. That's a couple of points there that you're going to lose that you won't have to lose just by looking at the model. Look at the model. How can I do this? Look, he's got it like this. Well, I don't know how, or I don't feel like it, so away it goes. I mean, that's your choice, but that's some points you're losing that you don't have to lose. Again, one last time, the first time, however you look at it, just apply yourselves as much as you can. Get these points, guys. Okay? I'm rooting for you. So those are the 3. The key to this essay will be form, guys. If you follow the prescribed form, that's the first one here. We're going to go over this in a second. You will do well. Okay? So unlike other essays where you had the topic, you knew what you had to do, we talked about putting it together. There really wasn't form, per se. You're pretty open on how you did it. Okay? This one is formulaic. That means that if you follow this form, you'll do good. Okay? Remember the whole idea of the writing process? The idea is making objectives so that within a preset framework, you can do what's required in on time. Same idea. The form is a process. If you follow the form, in spite of any barriers you set up for yourself, we all do it. Okay? You should be okay. Do you remember the 5-paragraph essay from high school? Everybody pretty much had to do a 5-paragraph essay at one point. The same idea. The only difference, as you'll see when I open this, is instead of the word paragraph, it says part. So it's a 5-part essay. And you'll see in 1 second how it pulls together. So we'll finish going over this. So the relative chapter in our text is part 2, chapter 14. Okay? And some keys remember here, guys, all right? The form and ideas document will have a lot of ideas in there for you. You can pick one of those ideas. You don't have to. You can go on your own and pick an idea that you maybe already have. That's fine. But, here's that but. You have to make sure that whatever you're picking has at least two sides to it. And you have to step back and look at it, okay? Because if it's your pet argument or something like that, you may think it has two sides because you're so used to dealing with it, but it might not, okay? You have to make sure there are at least two sides to the argument, a pro and a con, a for or against, etc., etc. Okay? You don't want a gray argument where, there's not really an argument, but there are different sides, It has to be, clear, okay? I recommend that you use one of the big issues of the day, okay? Gun control, abortion, legalizing marijuana, the big issues, violence, violent crime, funding of the police, that kind of thing. Those are all big arguments that we've been having in the past few years. The vaccination should be mandatory, that kind of thing. Those are big arguments. Those have definite sides, right? A pro-choice, pro-life one, abortion. It's blowing up right now because the courts just ruled against versus with. So, two definite sides there, a pro and con, for, against, right? There are a lot more than two sides to that particular issue, right? Because there are degrees of sides there too, right? A lot of people are for it in this condition or against it in this case, but not in this case. There are a lot of different. Same thing with marijuana. There are a lot of parts to that, moving parts to that, right? There's pro and con, but there's levels of pro as well. Do you want it legalized medicinally, which is just for medical purposes? Do you want it legalized recreationally so we can all enjoy it? Those kinds of things. So there's degrees once you get past the initial pros and cons. Right. Another thing to keep, that's what I said, I suggest here you go big. Choose a big issue, like abortion, marijuana, First Amendment, Second Amendment, ultimately, you can choose what you wish as long as it has at least two sides. The larger issues will be easier to find supporting information. Okay? And for this, you will need the sources as well. Okay? So the bigger the issue you pick, the more you're going to be able to find out. You can pick a local issue. Maybe there's a neighborhood argument. They're trying to put a stoplight in at a corner and people are protesting it. That's a good argument. And you can certainly do something like that. Maybe you want to argue against putting a stoplight there, and it's certainly legitimate. But where are you going to find the source? You need sources. You can, you could. It would just require harder digging, that's all. And you're certainly welcome to. The bigger the argument, the easier it will be to deconstruct it, if you will. Okay. Remember that sources in conjunction with things like blogs or any kind of an opinion or things that regular people can edit, like Wiki, don't count as one of our accredited sources. Surprisingly, very few people use sources like that. I was very curiously proud because I didn't mention it before. But you did, and that was good. But if you do, just be careful because you're going to get me commenting saying this is not an accredited source. Okay? I think I put an announcement in here about that to the fact. Yeah, see, this one right here about secondary sources. Sources such as Schmoop, Cliffs Notes, Spark Notes, EndNotes, Book Rags, blah, 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 are not accredited sources for the purposes of this assignment. I'm not saying they're not accredited per se, but for our purposes, they're not accredited. The dictionary thing as well. You can, if you cite a definition, right, and you have to look it up in the encyclopedia or whatever, of course, because it's not your idea, it's the source, you still have to cite it, right? But it doesn't count towards one of your three. because has nothing to do with our argument per se, but you still have to do it because it's not your thought. It's not your idea. Remember, anything that's not your thought is potentially a secondary source, or something that should be cited, I should say. Okay. And then there's a document in here called What is a Secondary Source? You can find it in the Foundations folder, the Lessons folder. And that will go into more detail about this. Hopefully you saw this announcement already and looked at this stuff. If you haven't, give it a look. Doesn't hurt. I mean, you don't want to have not made the mistake up to this point and then make it on the third essay. That would be silly. Okay. So there you go. Oh yeah, okay. Remember now, when you're considering whatever it is that you're going to argue, you're going to be considering both sides of the argument, right? Because you're creating the argument. You're going to ultimately need to choose your three best support points in your argument. So I'm going to choose the issue and a position. I'm going to choose the issue of, let's say, marijuana. My position will be that it should be legal in Georgia. Okay. I'm just going to stay with the top issue. I'm not going to go into the deep issues. I can, but I don't have to. So I'm going to work hard if I have to. So my issue and position, which is my first sentence, it's my thesis. That's going to be marijuana should be legal in Georgia. Oh. Tells the reader exactly what I'm talking about and how I'm going to be talking about it. Pro language, right? So immediately you know what I'm going to argue and what side I'm on. Okay. Then I'm going to present my three reasons for support. Okay? And then the rest of the essay gets in depth with those reasons. Okay? I'm going to show you this in a second in detail. It's part of the form that we just talked about. The issue and position, three support points. That's the thesis for this assignment. Okay? If you think about what a thesis should be, right, it's exactly what it needs to be. Right? What's the point of the assignment? The point is to present an argument. So your reader needs to know what you're arguing and how you're going to argue. Okay? When you're picking those three things out, okay, you are going to be needing to consider your opponent's responses. Because remember, unlike an oral argument where you can just jump in and argue or debate, okay, in a written argument like this, you only get one shot at it. Okay? So you need to make the best argument you can right away. Because you're not going to get a chance to respond to anything the reader, i.e. me, might have to say. So when you're thinking about it, so I'm going to think about the issue of marijuana and legalizing it. I'm going to think, what would be my three strongest arguing points for that? Well, one, think of the tax money you could raise. Right? Okay. Two, we have an opioid crisis in this country where there are people in pain who are having more and more problems getting pain meds. Right? If you've been in pain in the last couple of years, you know it's hard to get pain meds. Because there's a whole element of society that abuses pain meds. Because of that element, people who genuinely can't get it, or it's very hard to get. Now they even have pain. Guys, you know they didn't have pain management clinics before like 2 or 3 years ago. Those are brand new. It used to be your doctor would hand you a prescription for that. They're getting in trouble, pressure, because of this opioid crisis where supposedly it's being overused, and et cetera, et cetera. So that might be my second point of support. Well, here now you have marijuana, which claims to have, medicinal slash, cheesy benefits. Why not? It's not physically addictive. It can be psychologically addictive, but the jury's still out on that. Well, we know it's not physically addictive. No one's ever died from a marijuana overdose, unlike opiates, of course, which uses all the time. Think of every time you see the word fentanyl. Fentanyl is supposedly laced in all kinds of things. Supposedly the smallest amount of fentanyl can kill an adult. I'm not that kind of doctor, I don't know for a fact. I'm just stating on what I read, but you get the idea. So we have this relatively harmless substance, natural substance, that you can literally grow in your backyard. very easily. It's a weed. It's called weed. That's why it's a weed. It's easy to grow. Okay? And you can use that for your, issues. And then my third reason might be, well, if the police aren't busy locking up people for getting high and smoking weed and all that stuff, they can concentrate more on violent criminals who are out, assaulting and killing people instead of wasting their time, in situations where we're talking about a drug that doesn't harm anyone. And even if it did, it would only harm one person taking it. Okay? So it's a better use of our resources, if you will. So I think I'm going to argue those three reasons. But I'm going to think in my head, all right, so let's take the first one, the tax one. I'm going to raise a nice tax base because I'm going to sell this stuff like cigarettes. And I'm going to put a tax on top of it. So you're going to be able to buy this at a clinic or wherever they're going to decide to sell it. And there'll be a state tax, right? Just like anything else. And that revenue will go into a fund that will support whatever I want to support with it. And it's millions of dollars. So I'm thinking to myself, what would my opponents say to that? What would their argument be to that? It's hard to argue money, right? Lots of good can be done with money. So that's a good thing. My next one, the whole idea of the medicinal stuff, with the opioid crisis, what would the argument be against it? And then the same thing for the third. So I have to think about my opponent. I have to think about what they could potentially argue. So when you come up with your reasons to support whatever position you're choosing on an issue, I would suggest when you're coming up with your essay, you at least make a list of all of the potential reasons of support. Right? You're only going to use three, but you want to pick as many as you can so that you can go through them and pick your three best. Okay? One of the three best. So you are in fact going to be considering the other side, but you're not going to be writing about it. So be careful with that. Sometimes you get, when you're arguing, you have a habit of mentioning the other stuff, the other side. You don't want to mention the other side. You want all attention focused on what you want the attention focused on. In the case of a persuasive or an argument, I say the object here is to persuade or win the argument.